In 1906, President Teddy Roosevelt created the nation's first national monument designation. The purpose of this designation was to preserve for all Americans significant pieces of the country's history, ecology, geology, and beauty. All national monuments are designated by U.S. presidents and are chosen as their personal memorials of those most special parts of this great country. Memorials that they see a need to protect over all others. Some are big, some are small. Some garner large budgets and staff. Others, next to none. All were chosen by presidents who considered them the most important places to protect over all other places in the country. America's national monuments tell the story of the nation's past and present glory. Hello, I'm Jordan Murphy, and I'll be your guide as we visit 11 national monuments located in America's Pacific Northwest. The Pacific Northwest is one of the most tectonically active areas on the planet. The 3 monuments in this program showcase the spectacular geological formations this activity has produced. Pinnacles National Monument is one of the best places along the Pacific Coast to see firsthand the results of the colliding plates along the San Andreas Fault.
Pinnacles National Monument is a place of great surprises. Rising out of the chaparral-covered Gabilan coastal mountains, mountains that are east of Central California's Salinas Valley, are massive monoliths, soaring spires, and sheer rock canyons, all remnants of one half of a volcano that was part of a volcanic cluster that originated near present-day Los Angeles. Indeed, its other half is still there today.
And the pinnacles up here, it's actually the solid rock that formed within the volcanoes and then over time eroded into the unusual shapes that you see today.
Even more surprising is that Pinnacles National Monument is technically not even in North America.
In strict geologic terms, we're not actually in North America here. We're actually on the Pacific Plate, which has moved north relative to the continent.
Another surprise at Pinnacle National Monument are the Talus Caves. Caves that are not really caves in the ordinary sense of the word. Designated a national monument in 1908, Pinnacles was one of the earliest set aside by the 26th President, Teddy Roosevelt. Compared to the surrounding dry chaparral and oak savanna of the Coastal Range Mountains, Pinnacles supports a surprising diverse collection of plants and animals that thrive along Bear Creek, a creek that remarkably flows all year long. This riparian, or streamside community, is home to the California buckeye, with its large, festive-looking nuts. Look up at the gray pine trees, and one finds another surprise. Pine cones that are nearly as big as pineapples. They are the largest pine cones you're ever likely to encounter. The seeds from these trees support a thriving community of mule deer and a number of ground squirrel species. There is a network of hiking trails in the monument, but the highlight is the Balconies Trail. It starts at the ranger station and winds up a spectacular canyon ridge on its way to the Talus Caves. Halfway there, hidden among the dry oaks, one encounters a surprisingly beautiful fern cathedral. Tucked in the deep recesses of the spring-fed ecosystem, almost hidden from view, is the California red-legged frog, an amphibian that is today making a comeback after nearly vanishing from this ecological oasis. Finally, the Talus Caves. Talus Caves are actually openings between rocks that have fallen into a valley. Here, these rocks are giant rhyolitic boulders from the old volcano, now delicately balancing on top of each other. The spaces in between are the caves. Another thing one can't help but notice is Pinnacle's abundant bird life. There are two species of jays, the California scrub jay and the iridescent blue stellar jay. There are 6 species of woodpecker, including the noisy acorn woodpecker. But the biggest surprise for any birder is a glimpse of North America's largest soaring bird, the California condor. Once reduced to a mere 22 birds, its fate was almost certainly extinction. But through heroic conservation efforts, this magnificent bird is making a comeback. Pinnacle's National Monument is now one of the most successful reintroduction sites for the California condor. Rangers Carl Brenner and Daniel George have hiked the High Peaks Trail, hoping to locate one of these birds that wasn't in its usual roosting spot the night before.
Sure, you got the...
I have some equipment, yes.
Excellent. I just came up with binoculars. Thank you.
Okay, so I will get out the radio receiver.
As you're assembling the Yagi antenna here now, this is tuned in for the 164 to 165 range that we have the transmitter set up for on our condors. All the condors have at least 2 transmitters on them. Radio receivers, that is. Radio frequency transmitters.
Like the one that, like this one that we...
Oh yeah, this is a perfect example right here. This sends out the signal, and this receives from it. And so we should hear a little blipping noise if we can get one of them.
And I'll change the frequencies and... Is that one coming up over the ridge?
Oh yeah, it looks like we won't even need the receiver necessarily. We can just get the wing tag number off of it. I see 99 with 2 dots. That means it's bird number 299. Now we record that information. We could verify it with this, but visual is always better than auditory, so
okay,
we can write that one down for the record books.
Wonderful.
Look at the rich agricultural valleys that surround the Gabilan Mountains, the mountains that contain Pinnacles National Monument. And it's not hard to imagine what a harsh land this was for California's Native Americans, and a harsh land for the Spanish settlers that arrived here nearly 250 years ago.
What life was like for the Mexican Californios during that time before California became part of the United States. They lived on very large ranches. These ranchos could be tens of thousands of acres large. Now that land was not all developed. It was grazed upon by these huge herds of cattle. And the Mexican Californios themselves lived in haciendas, would have been the ranch complex, the house complex.
Replacing the Spanish in their elegant haciendas were hard-luck American homesteaders of the late 19th century. Homesteaders now long gone. Homesteaders written about by the area's favorite son, Nobel Prize winner John Steinbeck.
Steinbeck's grandparents, on his mother's side, their name was the Hamiltons. And they actually lived not far from the monument on the, let's see, on the east side of the Salinas Valley, but it's the west side of Pinnacles National Monument. It's on that western-facing side of the Gabilan Mountains. It's a very dry environment, extremely dry. The soil there is very thin, not very good for agriculture. Steinbeck has a very memorable description of what it was like for the homesteaders to live at that time, at the beginning of one of his novels, the novel East of Eden.
The Hamiltons would have been rich people, but the acres were harsh and dry. There were no springs, and the crust of topsoil was so thin that the flinty bones stuck through. Even the sagebrush struggled to exist, and the oaks were dwarfed from lack of moisture. Everyone that lives in California is aware of the San Andreas Fault. A fault whose movement produced the devastating 1906 San Francisco earthquake, when 28,000 buildings were destroyed and 3,000 people died. Carl Brenner is the chief interpretive ranger of Pinnacles and has been studying this nearby fault and how it produced the bizarre sequence of events that brought Pinnacles' extinct volcano to its present location.
The area that we're standing in now is changed dramatically over time. Originally, where we're standing, well, just to the west of where we're standing was 195 miles south of us, creating what was known as the Pinnacles volcano. We're on the North American plate. The other part of the monument is the Pacific plate, and where they're now striking, there used to be a third plate between there called the Farallon plate, and it was being subducted or sliding underneath the North American plate, creating pressure under the Earth's crust. Well, this pressure had to go somewhere, so it was being given off through 5 different vents that are now in the park area that created a stratovolcano that was about 8,000 feet high and about 15 miles long. And this erupted over time, eventually giving off all that magma through the volcanic vents, and the volcano became extinct. Well, as the North American and Pacific plate are hitting and slipping, it's tearing that volcano in half, and that extinct volcano has been ripped in half and moved. This portion, the Pinnacle Formation, is moved 195 miles north of what we call the Nenoch Formation, which is down near Lancaster, just north of Los Angeles. And in that time, weathering and erosion has caused over a mile of rock to become no longer in this area. It's moved from that 8,000 foot high down to about 3,300 feet, which is the highest point in the park now.
The most important and largest ecosystem in the monument is the chaparral.
Here in these dry hills, where the summer temperatures can frequently get up to 110 or even hotter for days on end, the dominant vegetation is scrub. And we use the old Spanish name chaparral to describe this type of scrub, or this community of scrub. Now there's many different types of bushes that compose the chaparral type brush community, and in different parts of California, different species of shrub will dominate. Here in the Pinnacles area, the dominant shrub is what's commonly called chamise. I've heard some people call it greasewood also.
But always, it is the towering palisades produced by that far-from-home old volcano that surprises and inspires the visitors to Pinnacles National Monument.
Craters of the Moon National Monument preserves one of the last great lava flows in the continental United States. The landscape here, it's unworldly.
"15,000 years ago, a great fissure opened up in central Idaho, and molten lava poured out, creating a place like none other in the nation. An area so eerily desolate that it was described in the late 1800s, long before anyone ventured into outer space, as resembling the surface of the moon. This otherworldliness description of this landscape stuck, and from then on, it was called Craters of the Moon. In 1924, President Calvin Coolidge set aside Craters of the Moon National Monument. Visitors to this place of desolation experience a symphony of shifting forms. Here, a sharp early morning sun reveals haunting creations with names like Devil's Orchard. Here, the interplay of light and shadow reflects off the glistening black lava rock. A phenomenon that is eerily beautiful, awe-inspiring, and mystifying in its ghostly splendor. Interestingly, the last eruption at Craters of the Moon National Monument occurred less than 2,000 years ago. Undoubtedly witnessed by the Native Americans who lived in the region. What they saw was molten lava spewing across the landscape. Lava that would have resembled the great lava flows in the Hawaiian Islands today. Indeed, there is no better place in the world to see the results of basaltic volcanism than Craters of the Moon. The most dominant features at Craters are the numerous cinder cones. Cinder cones arise from volcanic eruptions, tossing gaseous basaltic rock into the air, which then falls back to Earth, creating the typical cylindrical cone shape. One of the monument's most impressive cinder cones is the nearly 700-foot-high Inferno Cone. From the top, the view is spectacular. The monument also contains some of the world's best spatter cones.
They are miniature volcanoes that are formed towards the end of the eruptive cycle. And they're composed of globs of lava that didn't go very far from the vent. So they collected around the vent and created these beautiful miniature volcanoes that you can see along our loop drive here.
Other large-scale volcanic features in the monument include giant cracks, fissures, and 4 very large lava tube caves. But perhaps most impressive of all are the surface features. Features that were shaped when lava poured out of the giant rift multiple times and snaked across Craters of the Moon National Monument. The names for many of these features are Hawaiian in origin because that is where they were first described.
All of these rocks are basalt. Same kind of lava that you would see out in Hawaii at Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. So when you're looking at this landscape here, don't think Mount St. Helens, think Hawaii. And we speak Hawaiian every day here in southern Idaho to describe these rocks. We talk about the different textures of the rock, the pohoihoi, which is the smooth, ropey lava, and the rough, textured lava, which is known as a'a.
Here are some other features. Because Craters of the Moon is such a harsh, barren environment with cold, brutal winters, torrid hot summers, and almost constant blustery winds, its human history is negligible. Once part of the Shoshone Nation, Craters of the Moon surprisingly contains some mysterious artifacts near the Tube Caves, such as these rock circles.
Some of them, we're still, and archaeologists and the Shoshone themselves really don't understand exactly why they were built. They may have served some ceremonial purpose.
At one time, the Oregon Trail, which brought over 500,000 immigrants on a 2,200-mile journey to Oregon and California, took a detour. A detour that rerouted the wagons north of Craters of the Moon to avoid Indian conflicts. It was called Goodale's Cutoff.
The pioneers who took this route weren't what you would call happy about it. They wrote all kinds of negative things about Craters of the Moon as they came through here because it was in the middle of the summer and you can't blame them in the least, and it was a very difficult place to traverse.
Today, Craters of the Moon is a wonderful place for tourists and scientists to explore. Craters of the Moon's geology involves two distinct events. One that occurred as recently as 2,000 years ago, creating many of the lava flows in the monument. And another event that produced the surrounding old volcanoes millions of years ago. This event started in Oregon, and over the next 17 million years shaped Idaho's famous Snake River Valley. Today, that event is still going on in Yellowstone National Park. All of these effects have been produced by the North American continent moving over what geologists call a hotspot.
A hotspot is a plume of molten magma from deep within the mantle, which is sort of like a candle that's flickering beneath the Earth's crust. And it stays stationary, and the crust itself is moving over top of that feature. And from time to time, over the last 20 million years, there have been these enormous eruptions that have occurred as a result of that mantle plume. The most recent of those events is beneath Yellowstone National Park. It happened only 600,000 years ago.
Fast forward to around 12,000 years ago, and a giant tear in the Earth's crust begins to open here.
Well, one of the most fascinating features we have here is really the volcano that's responsible for all of this, and that's the Great Rift itself. The Great Rift is a 52-mile series of cracks, volcanic fissures, that starts here and goes out in that direction about 50 miles. And portions of that are hundreds of feet deep. And you can hike out into our wilderness area and walk right up to the edge of these very deep cracks that we have that are the source of the lava that created this landscape that you see around you here.
This tension, this pulling the land apart here, is the same tension that is pulling the North American continent apart and producing the vast area to the west known as the Basin and Range. Eruptions from the Great Fissure here have occurred 8 times, roughly every 2,000 years for the past 15,000 years. Is another eruption due soon?
All of the forces that caused those past eruptions are still very much with us. That tension on the plate, the heat that exists beneath the Snake River Plain is still there. And so that's why we think, and that's why the scientists think it's likely to happen again at some point. And I'm looking forward to it. I think it'd be very exciting. Wouldn't have to go all the way to Hawaii to watch lava flowing. You could see it right here in southern Idaho.
The Devil's Postpile is truly one of the world's geologic wonders.
The Sierra Nevada Mountains, sometimes called the High Sierras, are one of America's great mountain ranges. It is a range that is exclusively located in the state of California. The Sierras contain the highest point in the contiguous 48 states, Mount Whitney, at 14,494 feet high. It is a range whose snow-capped peaks supply much of the water for California's agriculturally rich Central Valley. Snow-capped peaks that also supply much of the water for California's 2 great population centers, the Los Angeles Basin and the San Francisco Bay Urban Complex. The mountain range is a place of great wilderness solitude, a place for spectacular waterfalls. It is a place where gold was found. Gold whose discovery changed the course of the nation. But it is also a place that contains the most remote of the national monuments in the lower 48 states, Devil's Postpile. Here there is no fancy visitor center. It is a monument that is only open 6 months of the year. Yet it contains something special, something worth the trip. Devil's Postpile was set aside as a national monument by President William Howard Taft in 1911. The Sierra Nevada is a mountain range that is volcanic in origin. Just outside of the monument is the first reminder of that origin. Here's a dome of obsidian, black volcanic glass. Inside the monument is another reminder of the Sierra's volcanic origins.
This is sort of a little bit of evidence that, in fact, there are still volcanic events in this area. Mammoth Mountain, which is just over these trees here, is a dormant volcano, but a volcano nonetheless. It's erupted, I think the last time was about 40,000 years ago. There's still magma beneath our feet even today, and this soda spring is testament to that. This water is carbonated, it has carbon dioxide in it. Carbon dioxide released from that magma chamber is forced into the spring water that's coming up here at the surface. And so this water tastes just like well, like a Sprite or some kind of soda water, but instead of a factory forcing the gases into the water, carbonating the water, the earth is doing that. The earth's pressure is forcing those gases into the water. Once the water reaches the surface here, the surface of the earth, atmospheric pressure is much less than the pressure deep beneath the surface of the earth, and those gases can escape. And those are the bubbles that we're seeing today.
The water from Soda Springs flows into the headwaters of the San Joaquin River. It is one of California's two great rivers. In the monument, it cascades over ancient basaltic rocks. Finally, it cuts through a deep canyon. A canyon whose walls reveal a most unusual pattern. A geometric pattern. This is just a tease for what lies ahead. One of the truly geologic wonders of the world. One of the two great monoliths in this country. Devil's Postpile. Like the other great monolith, Devil's Tower, Postpile too is of volcanic origin. Every angle on the monolith provides a stunning new view of this most unusual natural structure. Just as stunning as the walls is the very top of Devil's Postpile.
The top of the post pile is rounded off, dome-shaped, and the surface is actually polished by the glaciers, polished to where it shines in the afternoon sun. Another thing we see are the glacial striations.
And of course, the most perfect six-sided hexagons you will ever see in nature. The early human history of the High Sierra is shrouded in mystery. Archaeological evidence shows that Native Americans came to the mountains to gather obsidian to make tools, but probably never lived in the harsh climate found here. And it is known that some of the earliest white settlers raised sheep in the area. But the event that transformed the region, as well as the nation, was the discovery of gold at Sutter's Mill in 1848. Not far from Devil's Postpile is perhaps the best preserved gold mining ghost town in the world, Bodie, California. In its heyday in 1878, it was the second largest city in California. The discovery of gold in the High Sierras brought a large flow of people into the mountains and began the spectacular population growth that has characterized California ever since. This discovery was instrumental in starting the American Civil War and in assuring victory for the North. In all, $550 million of gold were recovered from the Sierra Nevadas in the second half of the 19th century, including $34 million from Bodie itself. Interestingly, it was those early gold prospectors who gave the monument's distinctive feature its name. To them, it looked like a stack of fence posts. Hence, they called it the Devil's Postpile. The High Sierra's origins start over 100 million years ago. At that time, the edge of the continent was where the Sierras are today. Then, through tectonic action, the ancestral Sierras grew up as a series of volcanoes erupted. Next, for some unknown reason, the edge of the continent shifted west to where the coastal mountain ranges are found today. During this time, the ancient volcanoes were largely eroded away. Finally, a new process of uplifting occurred, rising up and exposing the granite core beneath the Sierra Range. This core was then eroded through glacial action during the last 4 great ice ages, producing the spectacular peaks, valleys, and domes that are characteristic of the modern High Sierras. Still, volcanic action has continued to occur in places, producing recent lava flows that have resulted in the great monolith found here.
What makes Devil's Postpile so unique is the interaction of fire and ice, because Devil's Postpile was originally lava, originally born of fire, cooled and hardened into rock, but it was buried. And it's the glaciers that have excavated the Devil's Postpile that have revealed it to us. So in fact, it's the thousands of years of glacial working that has excavated the beautiful face of Devil's Postpile that we see today. Another thing that's so unique about the Devil's Postpile is the sheer number of 6-sided columns, the hexagon being nature's most perfect shape, found in honeycombs and on turtle shells. Even pencils are 6-sided because you can fit more of them in a box if they're 6-sided. And the Devil's Postpile has 55% of the columns are 6-sided, which is more than any other columnar basalt formation in the world.
The Postpile monolith is 60 to 80 feet tall. How far it extends into the earth is an unknown, truly making it one of the geologic wonders of America's West.
I hope it's been as memorable for you as it has been for me to visit some of the world's greatest geologic wonders. Thanks for watching. I'm Jordan Murphy.